tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We are doing it because it is right for Canada. It must be done.
Brian Mulroney, Canada's 18th Prime Minister, has died.
Nous votons non.
Plus, a mother claims an injury at an unsanctioned BC martial arts tournament put her son in a vegetative state. And
I think when rules are being broken like that, then having the restriction is necessary.
Ottawa is reimposing some visa requirements on Mexican nationals visiting Canada.
I think there's a lot of collateral damage, and I think that's the sad part.
Why and what the impact could be.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Brian Mulroney, a giant of Canadian politics, has died at the age of 84. His daughter shared the news on social media. Canada's 18th Prime Minister led two successive majority governments under the Progressive Conservatives from 1984 to 1993. He negotiated NAFTA, introduced the GST, and pushed for major constitutional reforms. He also fought against apartheid and acid rain and left office deeply unpopular. Chief political correspondent Rosemary Barton takes a look back at his life, his time in office, and why he evoked such strong emotions for so many Canadians.
His very first foray into politics to become leader of the Progressive Conservative Party brought him a bitter loss. He channeled that bitterness into another leadership run 7 years later. That time, he won handily and renewed the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada with the largest majority in Canadian history at the time. Brian Mulroney created deep loyalties with those around him in unifying the party. Some of those loyalties were later tested and lost. Mulroney came from the small town of Baie-Comeau on the north shore of the St. Lawrence River. Remote and isolated, he grew up in an Irish Catholic family, the son of an electrician at the local paper mill. But his ordinary upbringing was quickly overtaken by his extraordinary life. A close friendship with then U.S. President Ronald Reagan, what many saw as an attempt to change the relationship between Canada and the United States, and a first step towards a free trade agreement between the two countries, something Mulroney had initially opposed. In fact, free trade became the center point of Mulroney's pivotal second federal election in 1988.
Our message is clear. Canada is open for business again.
Bitterly fought, it became about Canadian patriotism.
You've sold us out. I happen to believe that once you...
Mr. Turner, just one second.
Once any
you
nation...
do not have a monopoly on patriotism. And I resent the fact that your implication that only you are a Canadian.
Mulroney won his second majority, leaving him lots of room to move forward with bold and potentially controversial ideas, including bringing in the much-disliked GST.
We are doing it because it is right for Canada. It must be done.
As a son of La Belle Province, Mulroney also made promises to recognize Quebec as a distinct society, and he sought to complete something his predecessor and political nemesis Pierre Trudeau failed to do: attempt to win Quebec's signature on Canada's repatriated constitution. That kicked off years of negotiations with the provinces, starting with the Meech Lake Accord. But as it moved towards ratification, some provincial governments had now changed and were suddenly no longer on board.
I believe it's about time that you allow the Aboriginal people to be heard.
A one-day meeting turned into a week-long, last-ditch effort to save the agreement that ultimately failed.
It's a sad day for Canada. This was all about Canada, about the unity of our country.
The disappointment turned to anger from some conservative Quebec MPs who left to form the Bloc Québécois, including one of Mulroney's close friends, Lucien Bouchard. Mulroney never forgave him. And Western Canadians, too, began to feel left out, leading Preston Manning to create the Reform Party, both leading to damaging splits within the Conservative movement down the road. Mulroney's second attempt to get Quebec to sign on to the Constitution came in the form of the Charlottetown Accord. It also failed in 1992 after being put to a referendum. It was the end of a quarter century of constitutional reform in this country, and it was more fodder for those who simply were ready to move on from the Mulroney era. Yet he still had work to do.
If there are not fundamental changes in South Africa, we are prepared to invoke total sanctions against that country and its repressive regime.
Pressuring international partners to denounce the apartheid in South Africa and free Nelson Mandela. It won Mulroney worldwide praise and a visit from a grateful and free Mandela just months after his release. Mulroney signed the Acid Rain Accord with the United States in 1991, earning him kudos from environmentalists. But Canada had wearied of Mulroney after a turbulent 9 years, and he left politics in 1993.
I always tried to do what I thought would be right for Canada in the long term, not what could be politically popular in the short term.
What followed was the start of a long Liberal reign. His successor, Kim Campbell, managed to win only 2 seats. His years after politics were marked with some embarrassing legal battles, including questions about his relationship with the German businessman Karl-Heinz Schreiber, resulting in an inquiry. Mulroney did admit to accepting $250,000 from Schreiber for consulting.
I was fighting for my life and the honor of my family.
The inquiry found the former Prime Minister's dealings with Schreiber were inappropriate and not ethical. Mulroney called it the worst mistake of his life and set to rebuild his reputation. Conservatives once again sought his counsel or his blessing, and the Liberal successor to his old foe, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, counted on his advice during negotiations around NAFTA 2.0. Even in the moments when Mulroney knew he was strongly disliked by many Canadians for his decisions, he believed strongly in why he was doing it.
In the fullness of time, history and a more reflective nation will tell us whether our hopes for the ultimate success of these policies were in fact realized.
Mulroney marked the history of this country time and time again, and now in his passing, Canadians may reflect on just how much he gave and how much he changed their country.
Rosemary Barton reporting. From friends to former foes and everyone in between, the list of those coming forward to share their memories of Brian Mulroney is nearly endless. Rafi Boudjikania now with just some of those tributes.
Prime Minister, great to see you.
One of Brian Mulroney's oldest opponents, but Jean Chrétien revealed shouting across the political divide was years behind them.
I talked on him on the phone the last few months a few times about his health and his mood, and I was patting his back. And we tend, when we talk privately like that, to talk about memories that we share. And as I said earlier, we have many coming from rural Quebec.
Not just home for them, but a key part in Mulroney's big bet in coming to power.
He took the Conservative Party in very bad shape. They had not been in government since in the 30s. And he built it back, but his greatest success was to break in Quebec. And it was his argument when he ran, and it turned out to be right.
Prime Minister Trudeau, who saw Mulroney last summer at one of his last public events, also praised him and noted how he has relied on his advice far past when Mulroney held office.
He was incredibly generous and effective in advising me and our government on the renegotiation of NAFTA during some very challenging years, where not just the advice and strategic counsel he gave me and us, but also active with his contacts as part of Team Canada to make sure that the messages on how important the friendship and the relationship between Canada and the U.S. was, not just for Canada but the U.S., was key.
And deeply so by one of his former MPs who visited him in Florida last weekend.
He was very weak, but already at that time he said to me, I'm not sure I'm going to finish the year. And I tried to convince him of the contrary, telling him, listen, this is the 40th anniversary of the election of his government, and that he had in front of him a number of events that we needed to organize to celebrate his legacy.
The party's current leader posted his thoughts. I will always be thankful for his candid advice and generous mentorship to me personally, Pierre Poilievre said. He unleashed free enterprise, crushed inflation, restored fiscal sanity, and concluded one of the greatest free trade agreements the world has ever seen. That legacy's importance echoed by Trudeau.
He shaped our past, but he shapes our present, and he will impact our future as well.
Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
To other news now, the federal government is reimposing some visa requirements on Mexican nationals visiting Canada. This means more and more wait times and a much more stringent entry process. The rule will come into effect Thursday night. And as Shoria Chetri reports, it will make it harder for many Mexicans hoping to visit BC.
Vancouver-based immigration consultant Veronica Diaz says she has received many calls since news of the new visa requirement broke yesterday.
People who are planning to come probably in the next 6 weeks will have to wait and postpone their plans to enter to Canada.
Previously, Mexicans only needed an electronic travel visa to enter Canada, which was much more straightforward. But now they have to go through a 4 to 6 week long application process.
They have to include more information because now the forms are in more deep about who they are, what they're doing, the history back 10 years in work history, and what are the purpose to visit Canada.
Back in 2009, Canada imposed a visa requirement before relaxing it in 2016. Now, the requirement has returned as a way to curb a flood of asylum claims from Mexican nationals, overwhelming the refugee system.
Most asylum claims from Mexico are either rejected by the Immigration Refugee Board of Canada or withdrawn or abandoned by the applicant, and so a change was needed.
Last year, over 25,000 Mexicans applied for asylum in Canada, making it the top source of claims from all nationalities around the world. Some Canadian nationals with Mexican origin are welcoming the move, especially following calls from the U.S. to limit illegal crossings.
I think when rules are being broken like that, then having the restriction is necessary.
But for others, the new requirement comes as a major deterrent.
That's very upsetting for us because we are trying to make Canada a living. So for our family, it means another step or another boundary.
I think there's a lot of collateral damage, and I think that's the sad part.
A refugee claimant advocate adds the move will no longer make Canada a safe haven for Mexican asylum seekers.
Mexico is one of the most dangerous countries in the world to be a journalist, to be a member of the LGBTQ community, to be a woman. And so having that ability for people to come and make an asylum in Canada was wonderful.
The new visa requirement is expected to affect roughly 40% of all Mexican travelers to Canada. Shoria Chetri, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC's Public Safety Minister says he's looking into how a repeat sexual offender was released in Kelowna without a public warning. 29-year-old Taylor Dewick was arrested earlier this month in relation to an incident at a Kelowna equestrian school involving a youth.
Both corrections and RCMP have the ability and their standards and things in place. That's why I've ordered an investigation, a full accounting of exactly what happened. I want to know which provincial agencies were involved, which federal agencies were involved, officials involved, because I want to get to the bottom of this, because quite frankly, this should not have happened.
Dewick is now facing charges of sexual interference, invitation to sexual touching, and breach of probation. Kelowna Mounties say they sought out a public disclosure order about Dewick's release, but the threshold was not met based on the totality of the circumstances and referred the matter to BC Corrections. Dewick is now in jail, awaiting a later court date. A mother is suing a number of people and groups connected to a martial arts tournament in BC last fall. She claims the event was unsafe and left her son injured in a vegetative state. Doctors have offered a grim prognosis for Shen Huan Lei, saying the 26-year-old is unlikely to recover after a brain injury put him in a coma. As Liam Britton reports, his mother says she wants accountability and answers for why her son is facing such a challenging future.
According to his mother, Shen Huan Lei dreamt of becoming a scientist. He was a grad student at UBC studying chemistry. But now, his future is very much up in the air. He's in a vegetative state, spending months in a coma at New Westminster's Royal Columbian Hospital, before being flown back to China this past Sunday. In sworn affidavits, 2 doctors at Royal Columbian offered little optimism, writing, quote, "There is very little likelihood that the condition of Zhenhuan Lei will improve or that he will be able to care for himself in the future." His mother, Ying Li, came to BC to be with her only son. In a statement written in Chinese, translated and sent by her lawyer, she said she feels, quote, "as if I have experienced a death." Li is blaming her son's condition on a martial arts tournament last fall, the 2023 Western Canadian Martial Arts Championship. She is suing, alleging organizers did not take appropriate safety measures, and the body that sanctioned the tournament, the World Kickboxing and Karate Union Canada, could not do so, making the event legally unsanctioned. The suit alleges one of Lei's opponents had previously fought as a pro, which should have kept him out of the novice tournament, but organizers still let him fight. These images from a YouTube video show Lei, at left with the yellow trim, in a different bout at the event. Lei was fighting in an event called Continuous Kick Light, but the suit alleges that it was in fact kickboxing, and organizers used a different name to avoid BC's rules for kickboxing events, and to cut costs. The claim says Lei fought another opponent after he appeared injured, and after that final fight, he vomited multiple times and fell in and out of consciousness. He suffered an acute subdural hematoma, a type of brain bleed. It took 90 minutes for an ambulance to arrive. Lei fell into a coma. None of these claims have been tested in court, and no statements of defense have been filed. Lei's lawyer says his client wants answers to many questions.
The matchmaking at this tournament, the officiating at this tournament, the medical response at this tournament, and whether the rules were enforced at this tournament. And what this lawsuit is going to do is get answers to all of those questions.
Now, we asked those named as defendants in the lawsuit for comment, and they mostly declined to comment on those allegations or didn't get back to us. However, organizers say their hearts go out to Lei and his family. Burnaby RCMP have told CBC News that they are investigating, although they didn't provide any more information. Lei's family is now fundraising online to pay for what they say are onerous medical bills that could last a lifetime. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
A major cleanup effort is underway this week along the lower Alouette River in Pitt Meadows. For decades, a short stretch of the waterway has been building up junk. As Rafferty Baker shows us, there are sunk boats, abandoned docks, and lots more to be hauled out.
It's garbage like this, what's left of an old crumbling fiberglass boat. Most of them have already been hauled out of the Alouette this week, but there are still some in the water. Evidence of more than half a century of neglect. This is what this spot looked like 4 months ago, a mess of abandoned junk.
Dock and debris.
Mark Karras grew up along the river, swimming, kayaking, and cycling along the dikes. Now he's on the board of directors with the Alouette River Management Society.
There's fiberglass boats with engine compartments, with fuel tanks, transmissions, all sorts of contaminants, fiberglass and styrofoam on board. So it became a little bit more alarming to me over time, especially when I was kayaking and I could see what was below the water level.
Karras says beyond this short section, less than a kilometer near the mouth of the river, it's pristine.
Any of the ecosystem salmon, the entire fishery has to navigate this environmental disaster that's at this end of the river.
So Karras and his group started trying to talk officials into doing something. After more than a year of advocacy, the City of Pitt Meadows and Transport Canada agreed to deal with it. The job has been contracted to a company from Brentwood Bay on Vancouver Island.
We do this all up and down the coast of British Columbia.
Adam Coolidge's crew will spend a week here. He says when they're done, about 200 tons of stuff will be removed from the Alouette. It will be taken to a sorting facility, then mostly tossed in a landfill.
Cleaning it up, it does feel good, right? And, you know, it's kind of sad that it has to get to this level before somebody says, hey, what's going on here? But, you know, that's everywhere.
Transport Canada is funding this project through its Navigation Protection Program. The agency declined to say how much it's costing to clean up the Alouette River. This is one river that feeds into another river that flows into the Fraser and finally into the ocean. It's a small part of a much bigger problem in BC.
Basically, it's all the products that were built in the 40s and 50s that have now just reached life expectancy and has died. And so we basically go along and clean it up.
Coolidge says when this job is done, he'll be moving on to another one in another BC waterway. Rafferty Baker, CBC News, Pitt Meadows.
Time for our first peek at the weather with science and climate specialist Darius Mandavi. And you have a leap year explainer for us.
Yes, I thought it would be interesting to talk about why we have leap years and what the little quirks of them are. So the reason we have a leap year is that we define a year as one loop around the sun, which isn't actually 365 days. It's a little bit more than that. And so this solution, because if we just took 365 days, we would end up with an average of around 6 hours extra or missing each year, actually. And that means after 100 years, we're around 25 days off. So the solution is instead, every 4 years, add a day. Does that work? Gets us really close, but it's not quite right. So instead, we then, if you see here, if we add just 1 day, we now have 11 minutes too much. So we had too little, now we have too much. So after 100 years, we're on 18 hours off. So a little bit better, but not quite right. So instead, we play hopscotch. You see, most centuries, we skip the extra leap year, but in years like 2000, 2400, every 400 years, we keep it on the century. Now, that gets us only 25.9 seconds too much each year, which is pretty much just right. We can deal with it in 3,000 years, whatever problems may come. Now, leap years are also a bit of a superstition around the world. For instance, in Ireland, back in the 5th century, they decided that it would be a day when women could propose to men because sometimes they were just taking too long. Meanwhile, in France, they actually have a newspaper that only publishes on leap days. Today marked their 12th issue, and they released the crossword answers from 2020. So that's pretty cool. And in Taiwan, meanwhile, leap years are considered bad luck. And so daughters will feed their parents pig trotter soup or pig trotter noodles, to ward off the bad luck that usually leap years are associated with the elderly passing away. So weird stuff across the world. But here in Vancouver, I couldn't find too many superstitious things, but not great weather coming with us today. Lots of rain on the way still, some snow for the mountains, and in the days ahead, it's really more of that as those freezing levels continue to fall.
Okay, and we'll wait for another, what is it, only 300 years? We'll be fine for the next check. All right, see you then.
Thank you.
2 northern BC First Nations are celebrating a partial victory at the province's top court. BC's Court of Appeal handed out a ruling earlier this week in a decade-long court battle over the Kenney Dam. It sits about 190 kilometers west of Prince George. Our Jason Proctor explains what this partial victory means.
The company that operates at Rio Tinto Alcan has sort of diverted water away from the Nechako River, which is a major source of fish, which is part of the livelihood and the culture of 2 First Nations there. They say over the years, that there's been tons of damage done, but what's happened is that they've sort of gone to the company to say, hey, this problem is happening with our fish stocks. The company says, well, we're doing everything the government says we should do. And when they go to the government, the Crown says, well, you kind of got to take it up with the company. So they get caught in this loop. They went to court about more than a decade ago to try to get damages against Rio Tinto Alcan. And on some levels, they lost because basically the court said, well, the company is acting according to the permits and they're not doing anything wrong in terms of what the government has required of them. But what's happened is this has worked its way up through the courts and now to the Court of Appeal is that there has been a statement put out by the court sort of as to the rights that these 2 First Nations, the Stilatin and Sekus, have in relation to this and what the Crown's responsibility is. And they're hoping that this latest victory gives them the ability to really have a say in terms of managing the fish stocks and the way that the water comes out of this dam, which is really the kind of important part for them.
Jason Proctor reporting. The Surrey School District has removed 4 well-known books from its recommended reading list for students in grade 10 and higher. It says it's concerned about some of the content, but as Saurabh Sandhu explains, the decision is drawing outrage from the provincial government.
To Kill a Mockingbird is one of 4 books removed from the curriculum, a decision the Surrey School Board says it made after a thorough review.
We initiated a review of these 4 books in question, and that review was initiated because we received feedback from our families. We received feedback from parents and caregivers who shared lived experiences of their students in situations in classrooms where they didn't feel safe.
The other books are John Ball's In the Heat of the Night, Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, and Absolute Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alex. The school board may be dropping the books, but the school board says there's no ban on them.
What we're saying is they're not recommended because there's a number of other books that are available that cover these same themes. You know, they talk about racial injustice, they talk about racism, and they do it in a way, there's still offensive language in some of these books that we recommend, but the primary reason we're recommending these resources over others is that they give agency and voice to characters from historically racialized, marginalized, or underrepresented groups.
The board's announcement drew sharp reactions from many.
It's a weird decision, and I just encourage the board to have another look here.
These are literary classics that teach important stories about racism and the realities of life at a different time.
BC's education minister also distancing herself from the decision.
School districts and the teachers make this decision.
The school board says 5,000 copies of the books remain available to students through school libraries. The Surrey School Board may have decided to drop these books from the curriculum. However, if a teacher still wants to use these books, they may submit a request to the school board. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Surrey.
After the break, we leap into an Irish tradition reserved for this day, women proposing to men. And we're going to speak with a Surrey woman who went viral for doing just that. Stick around. Thank you for joining our commercial-free live stream. More now on our top story. Former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney has died at the age of 84. Before he won the 1984 federal election in a landslide, he visited Vancouver as part of his campaign. Take a look as he speaks to a large crowd of supporters here.
He climbed up a gangplank to get on board a transport ship. He blitzed through a Vancouver market. Mulroney moved quickly today as if every second counted.
Win this time. All right, we'll win her for you. Absolutely.
The Conservatives did well here in the last election. They want to do better. And they know they have to work harder because the competition is tougher. John Turner and Iona Campanola have the Tories buzzing.
I can't hear you!
Tonight the Tories did everything they had to do. Their leader came to the riding where John Turner is running. They packed the place and they filled the balconies. Bill Clark has a fight on his hands. His leader came to support him and help him. Mulroney was clearly inspired by the large crowd. He returned to the patronage theme for the first time since he had to apologize for his own unguarded comments on patronage.
Charlie Turner, a senator for Ontario, 60,000. Claude Lajoie, gentleman usher of the Black Rod for the Senate. I'll bet you didn't even know what that was. Neither did he till I told him about the 60 grand.
It was a partisan crowd and a partisan speech. The Conservatives and their leader had a message for John Turner. The Tories are out and ready to do everything to beat him. Jason Moskowitz, CBC News, Vancouver.
It is Throwback Thursday when we dive deep into our vast CBC archives. Now, this only happens once every 4 years. Leap Day is here, and an Irish tradition dating back to the 5th century proclaims a woman is able to propose to a man on this day. Take a look at this story from Leap Day 1984, where one woman pops the question on air.
Hi. Hello. How are you? Did you know it's leap year day today?
I never thought about it.
Are you two married?
Yes, we are.
Did she propose to you?
Oh, many times.
Did she really? Tell the truth. Did you propose to him?
A few times.
Really? Are you two married by any chance?
No, we're not.
Are you boyfriend and girlfriend?
Basically.
Yeah.
Okay, would you ever consider asking him to marry you?
Oh, maybe in the future.
Maybe 4 years.
Well, enough of these hypothetical questions. There was a woman locally today who did pop the question to her sweetie live on the radio in response to an NW promotion.
Go ahead, Karen, you're on your own.
Well, Bri, I think it's about time we got married.
Is that the question?
Yeah,
That's
will
not
you
the
marry me?
Sure, as long as I can keep my bike in the living room.
Yeah, okay. No problem.
Okay.
Well, now you're getting married.
Yeah.
You think of the responsibilities.
Oh, yeah.
Why, soon there'll be other little Hendersons running around.
Oh, I don't know.
There'll be other mouths to feed. Education's to pay for, Brian. Stop and think about it here. You said yes so quickly. Do you realize now you're going to have to probably go into a house or buy a condominium or something?
Spend the rest of my life at the wharf.
That's right. You're going to be putting on an apron, Brian, and doing dishes at the sink.
Karen gets a dozen roses for proposing on the air and getting accepted by her husband-to-be, Brian Henderson. And the couple get a honeymoon cruise down Mexico way. And Brian gets a poem from Karen.
If I can do it. Remember this day, for yesterday is already a dream, and tomorrow's only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow's vision of hope. Do you remember that?
You bet.
Great.
Thanks, Kate.
So that was 40 years ago with NW's great Rick Honey. We're now joined by a Surrey couple who went viral on TikTok after the girlfriend proposed to the boyfriend in July of 2022. To talk about their proposal, we're now joined by Sukhman Garcha and Shiraz Barar. Sukhman, thanks for joining us, both of you. First of all, what inspired you to get down on one knee? And we saw in the video that you did do that.
So we were having a conversation with my mom, and she's pretty new to proposals because it's not really a part of our culture. And she actually suggested it. She was like, why do the men always have to propose? And that's kind of where I got the idea from.
Were you surprised that she came up with that?
Yeah, I was.
Why?
I don't really know. I wouldn't expect it from her just because she's not from our generation in general. So.
Yeah. And Shiraz, how did you feel? We're seeing the video now, and we're assuming you said yes. How did you feel during that?
I wasn't expecting it, to be honest. Because
even with the camera and the whole setup?
Because she is into social media, and so she told me that it was going to be social media related video. And so when I turned around and she was on one knee, I wasn't expecting it, but it made it that much more special for us.
And no hesitation. Yes, right away?
Yeah, 100%.
Now, this proposal went viral online. What were some of the responses you received?
Well, initially it was positive. I remember posting it, and within seconds, for almost 4 days, day and night, I was getting comments and likes, and shares, and a lot of negative comments, and majority of them were from women.
And what were the negative comments generally, if we could focus on those for just a sec?
More like, I don't have respect for myself, or why is she on one knee? Just along those lines.
How did that make you feel?
I was really shook. I wasn't expecting that. I did get a little bit of anxiety, and I did go through a little bit the first day, and then the second day I kind of was better about it.
And for both of you, the response you received from the proposal impact, did it impact how you view gender norms at all?
For me, what I would say was, in terms of gender norms, a lot of society thinks there should be a lot more equality. There's a lot less equality, and we need to do a lot more to get to where people think we want to get to. But it was kind of surprising, to reiterate what Sukhman said, that most of the people that were leaving the hate comments were women, and it's mainly driven by women in terms of empowerment and everything like that. So that was a little bit surprising, but it doesn't really change our view of other people. Like, people are gonna leave good comments, people are gonna leave bad comments. You take the bad with the good.
Looking back and after receiving the comments, if you had to do it again, would you post it again? Would you go through with it?
Yes.
Yeah. Why?
Because it doesn't change anything. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything.
Sukhman Garcha and Shiraz Barar, we really appreciate your time and congratulations. Nicely done.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks.
Ottawa unveils a long-awaited national pharmacare plan. What will it cover and what it means for you? That's next.
When Jim Sackaman's landline stopped working last November, he lost a lifeline.
I actually couldn't remember my own number, and I reacted in crisis.
The outage lasted 7 weeks. The 76-year-old and his partner struggle with memory issues, and his loved ones say a cell phone is not an option.
There's a true disability there in terms of his ability to learn that new skill at this point in his life with his medical conditions.
CBC News took their concerns to the CRTC. It says it's concerned about this situation and encouraged the family to file a complaint, writing, "The CRTC ensures that major telephone companies like Bell make basic voice telephone services available to their customers, and these companies are required to maintain their networks."
Effectively, these folks have had a disconnection.
This advocate calls the case egregious and says he isn't surprised to hear Sackaman's landline is still connected by old copper wire, which makes repairs more difficult. As Bell works to replace that network with fiber optic across the country, he says many rural customers are left on the edge.
That's just too low a quality of service, I think. And the CRTC could be doing more during this transition to ask or tell the companies to keep up their level of service on the copper until it's replaced.
Sackaman's family believes landline should be a priority for phone companies, calling them a right.
They're paying for it, and that's what they need in this house. They should have a consistent service provided to them.
In a statement, Bell said the goal is to get customers back in service as quickly and safely as possible by prioritizing repairs with the largest customer impact, like cell tower repairs. Bell said once those are done, crews restore service to smaller groups of customers and individuals. The company did not say why it took 2 months to repair Sackaman's landline, but it did credit his account. Angela McIver, CBC News, Halifax.
The federal government has now released the long-awaited details of its national pharmacare plan. Phase 1 will cover a number of birth control and diabetes medications for all Canadians. Marina von Stackelberg explains.
This is how I give myself insulin.
12-year-old Raina Smith needs a digital monitor to watch her blood sugar and a pump to deliver insulin. Thousands of dollars in medical supplies for her type 1 diabetes, paid for through her parents' private health insurance plans for now.
It makes me always worried about in the future because before all these medications were going to get covered, when I become an adult, how am I going to cover this? Do I have to choose a job based on what covers and what benefit cover insulin, cover my pump?
Worries Canada's health minister says she won't have any more. He's now introduced long-awaited pharmacare legislation. It commits the federal government to foot the bill for diabetes medication and devices, along with contraceptives for everyone. It does not promise full coverage of all drugs.
I think the question that Canadians are going to ask, once they get an opportunity to look at that data, is to say what is the most effective, efficient model to get to full coverage, to make sure that everybody can afford their medication, and that we choose the system that's right for that.
Ottawa will also create a national list of essential drugs that it may eventually cover and develop an agency to bulk purchase medication, all within 1 year of the legislation passing, which it likely will with the support of the NDP, who push the Liberal government to bring in pharmacare and want to see all necessary medications covered.
It also sets a structure for builds a foundation for further expansion down in the future for governments that want to go there, and of course the New Democrats. If we're government, we would want to go there.
Holland, wary to give a cost estimate for the two types of drugs, was pushed by reporters.
You are the Minister of Health. This is a question you knew you were going to get coming out today.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So what are we looking at here?
Maybe $1.5 billion. Like, I think it's, the question is it going to be lower than that? Is it going to be a little bit higher?
The health minister says Canadians could start getting their diabetes medication and birth control paid for as early as next year. But to get there, he'll first have to negotiate funding deals with the provinces and territories. So far, Alberta and Quebec have both said they're not interested in the plan. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
An Ontario woman says she has been through a nightmare after watching the man she thought was her son die in hospital, only to later get a text from him. Dan Takema takes us on her emotional journey and explains how the hospital is responding.
It just looked like Sean.
Heather Inslee hadn't seen her son, who struggles with addiction, in years. But when Ottawa's Montfort Hospital called in January to say Sean was there in critical condition, she rushed to his side.
He was laying in the bed with the ventilator, all hooked up, all wires, monitors, and everything behind him.
She watched over him, and when he died days later, honored his wishes to be an organ donor.
We cried. We cried so much. It was devastating.
Then, on the same day he was cremated, she got a text from him.
I phoned my husband and I said, "Is he dead? Do you think he's really dead?" I said, "I'm getting this message."
After a second text, they called and asked to speak to Sean.
Sean came to the phone, and we were freaked.
In a statement, the hospital acknowledged the misidentification, said the patient's true identity has since been confirmed, his family notified, and that it's reviewing what happened. The hospital didn't respond to questions about how the mistake occurred. The Ontario Hospital Association and other health experts say incidents like this are incredibly rare.
Identity is fundamental to safe care, making sure that you're providing the right care to the right person at the right time.
In the days that followed, Sean's family managed to find him with the help of Ottawa police.
I felt numb. I thought, I'm so happy he's alive, but I just went through all that morning.
He says he had no idea about all the confusion.
It sends chills up my spine.
He says it was a big eye-opener and that it offers a second chance.
It means making it right with my parents and my family, and getting back to be part of my family.
Inslee says she still doesn't know who she mourned in that hospital bed, but she has a message for his loved ones.
We never left his side. We stayed right with him, just as though he was our own son.
Inslee says she wants Montfort to come up with a better system for identifying patients.
to save other families the pain hers has endured. Dan Takema, CBC News, Ottawa.
An apology from the Saskatchewan Roughriders after their ad using, quote, girl math causes some outrage. Why the team and fans say their attempt at the TikTok trend missed the mark. After this.
Prime Minister Brian Mulroney didn't have to go through the crowds kissing babies. He brought his own along, Nicholas, plus his wife Mila and their other 3 children. Of course, it was a little difficult to see much of the fair. A circle of interested spectators and media followed every move.
Well, welcome to Canada. Have a good time.
The schedule calls for a visit to all the Canadian pavilions. No diversions, except one.
Hot dogs?
2, please.
2 hot dogs.
What do you want? With ketchup.
2 with ketchup. 1 with mustard. No mustard and Coke. Okay, just a Coke.
Can I hold root beer?
Unfortunately, the pop machine didn't work, so the Prime Minister couldn't get a Coke. With crowds wondering what all the fuss was at the hot dog stand, the Mulroneys pressed on.
Have a nice day. Thank you. Bye-bye. There we are. Thank you.
What do you think of the pavilion?
I loved it. I'm very impressed with all of them. Oh, yeah. I thought that it was going to be, I hoped it would be a great success, and it has been. I'm just delighted. Great for British Columbia, great for Canada.
Thank you. I'm from Ontario.
Well, where in Ontario?
London.
Oh, Neil and I just came from there. We were down there about 2 weeks ago. We had a great visit.
Next up, the BC Pavilion. The Mulroneys will be back for another day at the fair, just like regular folks.
Hi, how are you? Hi, nice to see you.
Connie Monk, CBC News, Vancouver.
Darius Madavi joins us now with our BC-wide forecast, but we're going to venture south and get an update on those massive wildfires in Texas.
Yes, so yesterday when we were talking about the Texas wildfires, just in the time it took for me to get the information to come up here, the fire grew an incredible amount. So I've just double-checked my numbers this time, and 1.1 million acres in Texas being covered. You can see here satellite imagery, you're picking up that heat from the fires here, and you can watch them spread over just the last 48 hours or so. And we're talking about an area that is almost the size of Prince Edward Island. So not quite as big as the Donny Creek wildfire here in BC last year, but conditions a little bit better than they have been, a little bit cooler, a little bit wetter. But unfortunately, this weekend, we're looking at those winds picking back up, gusting 50, 60 kilometers per hour again, and that heat coming back again. So not great conditions there. But here in BC, we do still have plenty of precipitation. You can see over the last 24 hours here on the south coast, and really across the region, we're going to be seeing plenty more still on the way. So you can see plenty of snow still coming. A little bit of rain still for Vancouver, but really just showers for the next few days. But still plenty of snow at those higher elevations. And if we continue to run this forward, you can see plenty of precipitation still on the way. Now, if we zoom out to the rest of the province, you can see some bigger systems coming in for parts of the province. But overall, we're looking at those weather warnings drop and conditions improving somewhat throughout the province. Still some winter storm warnings on some of those mountain passes, but overall conditions have improved. Still plenty of snow on the way for many areas, but as we saw for many of those lower elevations and coastal regions along the south coast, we are just looking at that rain, not so much the snow. In terms of conditions across the province, a bit more activity still throughout the south and on parts of the coast, but overall clearing up a little bit, although still some chances of stuff still to come. And here in Vancouver, in terms of a 5-day forecast, overnight tonight, also some thunderstorms, keep that in mind, as well as tomorrow morning. But overall, we're looking at a bit of a calmer situation going forward.
And a wet one. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
The Saskatchewan Roughriders are having to play defense after some season ticket holders said their new ad campaign was offside. And as Aishwarya Duda reports, a TikTok trend sparked some outrage.
I lost my mind. It was a case of stereotype after stereotype, negative against girls, against women.
The Saskatchewan Roughriders are getting some backlash over the use of girl math to sell tickets. The CFL team sent out an email to season ticket holders that reads, "Proficient in girl math? It's basically free." The ad goes on to say, literally the best excuse to wear matching outfits and take the stairs, earn the seltzers. The team is trying to pull off the TikTok trend.
If I pay for something with cash, it's free. Why? Girl math.
I spent $200 at one store, but all the other stores we walked into, I didn't buy anything. So when you spread it out, that was good.
You saved money.
I saved money.
What is this called? Girl math?
Girl math. But some longtime football fans and some marketing experts say the Roughriders fumbled on this one.
Take the stairs and earn the seltzers did it to me. Toxic diet culture.
So this rugged and masculine brand personality, calling women girls, and talking about things like girl math can come off as a bit condescending. When it comes to trends like girl math, it's one thing for girls to make fun of themselves and another for a man to poke fun of you.
I'm assuming they're trying to get like girls interested in football and increase their viewership. But I think that's interesting to not assume that, hey, maybe girls actually want to watch football and they're not just here to do stereotypical things that we've been told like we need to do. So I think it's a pretty out of touch ad. I'm a little embarrassed for whoever made it.
The writers say the ad was a playful attempt at the TikTok trend, but missed the mark. And for that, they unequivocally apologize. They also say women in the marketing department came up with the ad, but they accept it didn't resonate with fans.
And quite disappointing.
After the writers issued their apology, we checked back with Anne-Marie Sauer. She says she's pleased with the apology, but still confused and concerned that this kind of mistake was made in the first place. Aishwarya Duda, CBC News, Saskatoon.
If you're one of the millions of Canadians earning a fixed annual salary, you're likely not getting paid for the extra day of work during leap years. The average salaried worker may be losing out on hundreds of dollars, while employers collectively save billions. More now from Philippe de Montigny.
In the heart of Toronto's financial district, many who earn a yearly salary are not too happy to find out they aren't getting paid for the extra day of work during leap years.
I think it's pretty brutal. I know for myself, if I'm working, I want to be paid. Like, you still have your expenses for that day. I think we should be compensated.
Some argue it's a give and take. Being salaried comes with other benefits and more flexibility.
I'm not necessarily a 9-to-5 kind of gal, even if that's what my contract says. The reality is I'm expected to yield a certain amount of work, and that's what I'm getting paid to do.
It's a quarter of a day every 4 years, so that doesn't really kind of move that bottom line for me a whole lot.
But for some, it can add up to hundreds of dollars. Crunching the latest figures from Statistics Canada, the average salaried worker is losing out on $351 for a typical 8-hour day. And with more than 6.5 million people earning a fixed annual salary, about a third of Canada's workforce, employers collectively save more than $2 billion.
We use the term wage theft because it is a form of theft that workers are experiencing.
And it's a much broader issue the Workers' Action Centre is looking to tackle, from unpaid public holidays and overtime to withheld employee benefits.
This is a real crisis in Canada, and people are feeling it more because every dollar counts when the cost of living is as high as it is now.
People who receive annual salary will usually spend more hours of work in a year than what they're actually paid for. It's kind of expected from them. It's included in their salary.
Some contracts include pay for leap days, but it's still pretty uncommon. It's ultimately up to employers, and currently no law forces them to do so. Philippe de Montigny, CBC News, Toronto.
Two sisters born 4 years apart are technically turning 3 and 4 today. We're going to speak to the Dawson Creek siblings, both celebrating leap year birthdays. Day birthdays.
It was 1984, and a 45-year-old Brian Mulroney had just been named Prime Minister of Canada. We were a country hungry for change, so we handed the man from Baie-Comeau, Quebec, the largest majority in Canadian parliamentary history.
New days and new hopes and better tomorrows for all Canadians. Thank you for taking the time.
But the honeymoon soon ended. Within a year of being elected, he outraged senior citizens with his attempts to de-index their Canada pension.
And this shocks me because I thought that Mr. Mulroney was a man of integrity.
This afternoon, I have tendered my resignation.
And scandal continued to dog Mulroney throughout his first term, when 8 cabinet ministers were forced to resign. But his first term was also a time of political triumph.
This has been a good day for Canada and Canadians.
In 1985, Mulroney persuaded all the Canadian premiers to agree on a new constitutional deal called the Meech Lake Accord. But before it could be ratified, he had to fight an election on the free trade deal. The U.S. had found a very good friend in Brian Mulroney. Within 4 years, the free trade agreement was signed. And although many of us were disenchanted with the Prime Minister, we did give him the benefit of the doubt on free trade and returned the Conservatives with a healthy majority in 1988. But after the election, things began to fall apart.
That close to binding Quebec firmly, and I would hope forever.
The Meech Lake deal had failed, and the constitutional accord that replaced it was defeated in a nationwide referendum. But his final undoing had to be the GST, a 7% tax on just about everything.
We calculate the GST will yield significant economic benefits to the country.
Mulroney had to pack the Senate to do it, but he passed the hated goods and services tax. By 1990, his popularity was plummeting.
If you want to be popular, get yourself another job.
By this fall, Mulroney's popularity had dipped below 10% in the polls. Most political analysts agree the Prime Minister had little chance of winning another federal election. Deborah Goebel, CBC News.
Okay, hold on.
Two Dawson Creek sisters are celebrating a quadrennial event today. They're turning 3 and 4, born 4 years apart on Leap Day. Take a look as they talk to our Sarah Penton.
Usually when people ask what my birthday is, I just tell them, and then I get to see the reaction, and it's pretty fun.
Yeah. What about you, Olivia? What's it like knowing that everybody across Canada is so intrigued by your birthday?
I don't know. I guess it's just kind of rare.
Jordan and Olivia say they're celebrating their ultra-rare birthday with ice cream and a trip to the movies. Happy birthday. We'll see you in 4 years. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/bc.
We'll see you at 11 o'clock right after the National. Good night.